It's pretty buck wild. This is a buck wild book. Hi, my name is Adriana, and today I will be doing my reading wrap-up for the month of June. Before I jump into my stats for the month, please consider liking and commenting on this video and subscribing to my channel if you like bookish things. So in total for the month of June, I read 7 books, 5 eyeball, 2 audio, and those had a pretty aggressive genre breakdown. 4 of them were thrillers, 1 fantasy, 1 memoir, and 1 contemporary fiction. I had an average page length of 321.4 pages and an average rating of 4.1 stars out of 5. Let's jump in to the first book I read, and that was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. This is, I guess, not a sequel, just the second book by Jennifer Saint. Last year I read Ariadne and adored it, so I was very much looking forward to this one. It is a retelling of the Trojan War from the side of Agamemnon's, the main Greek aggressor's, wife Clytemnestra, as well as her daughter Elektra and the war bride of Agamemnon, who eventually comes back to Greece with him after the war, whose name is Cassandra. So we have 3 perspectives: Clytemnestra, Elektra, and Cassandra, and basically just delving into this story in a different light from these women's perspective. Clytemnestra has been treated rather poorly by the mythological canon of this story for a long time. I don't want to, I guess, spoil it for anybody who's unaware of the story of Clytemnestra within the Trojan War, but due to some of her actions, she has been kind of painted as this awful, terrible wife who, to the Greeks, was the epitome of a terrible, terrible wife. She gets held up to this incredibly unfair standard of being just the worst wife and is often compared to Penelope, Odysseus's wife, who waits around for 20 years for Odysseus to come back from the Trojan War, but is incredibly faithful and demure the entire time. Clytemnestra, not so much. She's not. She takes care of some stuff. And her daughter Elektra also takes care of some stuff. They are very similar people, and that leads to them not having the best relationship. And then poor Cassandra is just out here surviving the best she can. So I enjoyed this book a little bit more than I thought I would. I am not personally a huge Trojan War fan. That is not my favorite part of Greek mythology to read about or study or whatever else. I did appreciate the care and passion that the author obviously put into telling these women's stories and trying to make them as understandable as can be possible with them having an entirely different set of standards to modern day sensibilities. Clytemnestra, I think, was one that was probably fairly easy to endear her to the audience. Elektra, not so much. Her motivations are definitely very old and very Greek. So she is a fairly unlikable character, but I think the author does a really good job of telling her story with as much grace and compassion as she does for the other 2 POVs as well. I think I personally prefer Ariadne. I think most readers will prefer this over Ariadne because these women definitely have a lot more agency within their own story and kind of take care of business. So the next book I read in June was Diablo Mesa, the 3rd book in the Nora Kelly series. I have adored the Nora Kelly series thus far. It is kind of a spin-off of a larger series by Preston and Child. So the original kind of series is something I have dubbed the Pendergast universe, because I think there's a couple other spin-off series off of that main line series as well. But this spin-off specifically focuses on an archaeologist named Nora Kelly and her acquaintance Corey Swanson in the FBI, and together they work on kind of weird cases, so they tend to get just pulled into different stuff and see what happens. This one specifically starts with Nora Kelly at her job at the New Mexico Archaeological Institute, and a eccentric billionaire has made a request that Nora come lead a dig in Roswell, New Mexico to try to unearth a potential UFO. Nora, being a real archaeologist, thinks this is career suicide, doesn't want to do it. They tell her either she does it or she gets fired, she decides to bow out herself, and the eccentric billionaire hires her anyway. So throughout this dig, some weird things are going on, some weird things are happening, craziness ensues. They find 2 very old dead bodies that look like they had been tortured in the 40s/50s, which is how Corey Swanson from the FBI gets involved. So we got a lot going on. We got some aliens, potentially. And I enjoyed this one. I think it is a very fun romp in the series, but where this one ended off at makes me a little nervous as to how the series is going to progress in the future. So we'll see how I like the rest of the series. Depending on how the next couple books go, maybe I won't be finishing or keeping up with Nora Kelly as much, but this could either be, the series could either continue on at a high level that I have enjoyed, or this could be the downturn of the series. I don't know yet. So this next book I listened to as an audiobook, and it was part of the Pride 365 challenge for my library that I mentioned in a video that I can't remember which video it was now, but I will figure it out and link it in the cards. But basically the Pride 365 challenge was a reading challenge that my library started in June, and it is 12 books that have a LGBTQIA kind of plot line or character, or are just somehow connected to that community. And so the goal is that you read one of these books every month to kind of make sure that we are reading diversely all year round. So I thought it was really, really cool. I'm gonna do my best to read all these books if I can get my hands on them. And Fiona and Jane was the first one I read. So this is a short story collection of basically 2 friends, Fiona and Jane, who meet when they are really, really young, and it just kind of describes the evolution and I guess journey of their friendship as they grow up and move to different parts of the country and have different experiences and everything else. And I thought it was definitely a very realistic look at friendship and how different experiences can either bring, 2 friends together or push them apart. It's very kind of slow, slice of life. I mean, not really a lot is going on, but I thought it was good, and I think it's definitely worth your time. I think the LGBTQ representation was really strong and happy. It wasn't tragic. So I guess I'll talk about the next book I read for this challenge, as well as I won't talk about the other book that I'm reading, but I'm currently reading another book for this challenge, and it's kind of tragedy focused, and I hope they kind of get away from that tragic trope. So Fiona and Jane, not a lot of tragedy here. It's just kind of normal people going through their life, doing their thing. Love it. I thought it was really sweet, really strong, realistic. I liked it. Swinging to the other side of the realism spectrum, I read a NetGalley arc of Upgrade by Blake Crouch. So thanks to NetGalley and the publisher for that. It's pretty buck wild. This is a buck wild book. I haven't read too many of Blake Crouch's backlist, or I guess just too many of his books in general. But it seems like so far, I'm 3 for 3. His protagonists are a early 40s dude who gets separated from his family, and he has to overcome it with his special combination of brains and brawn. That was this as well. It is set in a future where humankind has messed with genetics a little too much and has caused a huge famine to happen, and so they have now outlawed any sort of genetic modification to humans or otherwise, specifically using tools like CRISPR and that kind of stuff. I imagine breeding, plant breeding is probably still okay, but I don't know, he didn't go too deep into it, what the actual logistics were of the laws of this future Earth. But our main character is basically an agent for this government agency that goes around and collects all of these scientists and whoever else that are conducting these experiments and this research. And during one of these raids, he gets infected by a virus that causes him to genetically mutate. And so obviously, being an agent, it's gonna cause him some issues. And it's crazy. It seems to start out like fairly normal, and then he gets infected and we're just off into space. So I enjoyed this. Very fast paced, very fun, like action, thriller, sci-fi sort of deal, but I feel like this type of story he's done better. So I still think Dark Matter was better, and yes, it's a different type of science, but like, I don't know. It's just another like early 40s dude dealing with science things. Maybe I'm just a little burnt out on that, but I thought it was good. Definitely worth a read, but not groundbreaking in any sense of the word. The last audiobook I read was High Risk Homosexual, and this is also part of that Pride 365 challenge for my library. This is a personal memoir from Edgar Gomez and his life as growing up as a young gay Latinx man in Orlando, Florida, and kind of some of the struggles he had with his Nicaraguan family and how they dealt with his, sexuality, how that affected his own ability to deal with his sexuality, him coming to terms with love, sex, how it connects. This was really, really heavy and something I really struggled, like really feeling any sort of connection with. I mean, there could not be someone who is more different to me than Edgar Gomez. But he is a really, really, really good writer. I thought it was super well written, but I like to read for education, but I also like to read for escapism, and this did not feel like escapism to me. I chose not to rate it because it is a memoir and it is someone's personal life story. So I didn't really feel fair to me to like put any sort of numerical judgment to it that way. But if you are looking to experience something, different or expand your knowledge and empathy about his personal intersectionality, I would recommend it. And finally, the last two books I read were Wayward and The Last Town, the books 2 and 3 in the Wayward Pines trilogy. I read Pines earlier this year. Loved Pines. Pines is so freaking good. These two I didn't love as much. Honestly, I'm gonna just be completely honest here. If you just want to read Pines and stop there and not read these two, that might be something to really consider. But I really can't say much about these without spoiling the first book, but I will say they do include my absolute favorite trope, which is a maniacal billionaire and his unhinged female assassin. So I did appreciate that. I liked Wayward more than I liked The Last Town. Like, the series definitely kind of just kept dropping off each book for me. Really loved Pines. Enjoy Wayward. I was very kind of average on The Last Town. I didn't really like the way some of the character conflict was handled and how some of the things were just wrapped up in a neat, tidy little bow in a way I didn't think felt particularly fair or kind to a certain one of the characters. Hate to end on a bummer, but I mean, I did enjoy them. They're pretty quick, short romps in this fun story. Those are the books I read. Let me know if you have read any of these and what your thoughts were. And thanks so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next video.